Hi, this is Dr. Michelle Robin with Small Changes, Big Shifts, Building Rhythm and Resilience. And I believe if you'll change one thing a month, one thing for the next 12 months, you'll change your life forever. Thanks for joining me on the journey. Hey, welcome to Small Changes, Big Shifts. I believe you change one thing a month, the next 12 months, you'll change your life forever. But it happens to be that this month we are focusing on kindness, and we have several 100,000 people joining us on this movement. And so as we were getting ready for this kindness campaign, I'm kind of one of those people, I like to integrate everything. So, yes, we're doing this kindness campaign, and hopefully you saw day 8 today. If you're following along, some of you are starting at a different day. I got day 8 right here in front of me. I'll start that with you here in just a second. But as we were preparing and doing all the research for this kindness campaign, we went online and searched to see who was doing great kindness work across the country. So today my guest will be sharing that with you. I'll introduce you here in just a minute. But hey, here's the kindness quote of the day. It is, whenever you make room for kindness, your heart turns into poetry. And so I think about how, and actually, Linda, I want to ask you, that's my first question. Let me change that. I'm just going to introduce you. So today joining me on Small Changes is Linda Cohen. She's been a kindness catalyst for over 10 years. She's the professional speaker, presentation consultant, and author of the 1,000 Mitzvahs, How Small Acts of Kindness Can Heal, Inspire, and Change Your Life, published in 2011 by Seal Press. Linda presents to organizations and businesses on the economy of kindness. I'm so excited to dive into that word. She's the past president of the National Speakers Association in the Oregon chapter. She loves practicing yoga, meditation, and will never pass up a good cup of Earl Grey tea. Linda, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It is so great to be here with you live. How cool.
Yeah, we're in the second Wednesday of our campaign. We went live last week, which I think you know about. Yeah. So how does this fit into you? And this is not on our script. So here we go. Whenever you make room for kindness, your heart turns into poetry.
Oh, it's really beautiful. I love that. I'm not a poet, but I think that when we focus on kindness, that feeling of love in our heart kind of does expand. And I know this is definitely I loved looking at your work and the science and the research about, what you were sharing, because of course that's what I've been sharing as well for several years. But I just love that idea of the giver and the receiver really benefit from kindness. So
the giver and the receiver. Hey, so Heidi, just so you know, Heidi, I'm wearing my Hug Dealer shirt for you.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to find that. One of my friends, Heidi, wants one of these. I reached out to my friend Sabrina. She's the one who made it for me. So she's going to be getting in touch with us. So Linda, I'm curious with your book, 1,000 Mitzvahs. Did I say it right?
Yeah, you said it right.
Mitzvahs, How Small Acts of Kindness Can Heal, Inspire, and Change Your Life.
Yes.
Talk about what you've learned over the last decade.
So that's a great question. And it's fun because I looked at your history and how you kind of, you wrote something recently about your 5th anniversary. I guess in July was your 5th anniversary from your accident, and some of the lessons you had learned and how they're relating to now during this pandemic. And for me, I basically took on a project after my dad died, and we'd had a pretty challenging relationship for most of my life. And that last year when he was diagnosed with lung cancer, and I knew it was not going to be much longer, we really did some healing. My dad was a therapist, so it was a great opportunity to do that healing. And after his death, when I decided to take on this project to do 1,000 mitzvahs, and in Judaism, a mitzvah is a good deed. It's an act of kindness. It's actually a commandment. The 10 commandments are mitzvahs, officially. But I never set out to do anything, earth shattering. I just was looking for a way to move through the grief that I had been feeling. And this was a great project. And so looking for these small, simple acts of kindness every day took me 2.5 years to finish the project, but it really did change my life. And so during those 2.5 years and in the years since then, I have distilled the 3 lessons of kindness that were really important to me. The first is that the size of the kindness doesn't necessarily matter. We all think it has to be heroic. It has to be a huge grand gesture. That is not necessarily true. In fact, I tell a story about toilet paper. So that's something I share in my keynote. I never really understood how toilet paper was going to play a role in the pandemic as well. So The second thing I share in the lesson that I learned was really about giving and receiving, and how I think it's easy to be the giver. And I think sometimes people feel like it's harder to be the recipient or the receiver of kindness. And I will say that in this pandemic last 7 months, I have seen that shifting. I think people are more receptive to receiving kindness because we are all in this together, and it can feel completely overwhelming. And many times we need to ask for something we might need. And so I have kind of enjoyed watching that one piece of giving and taking of kindness kind of shift over this last several months. And then the final lesson is the ripple effect. And I know you talk about that. And for me, that ripple effect was really, I don't know what this simple act of kindness is going to mean to this stranger, this neighbor, this person, whoever it is, but there is often a ripple effect, and it can be really huge. And I have heard so many stories in the last decade of, teachers and coworkers and employees who learn the value that act of kindness had on whoever that person was, years later. And it's really powerful. So those are my 3 major lessons.
Okay, let me see if I got them. Number 1, doesn't matter how big or small.
Exactly.
Number 2, it's a give and receive.
Yes.
Number 3, hang on. Number three.
You said it. It's what your thing is. It's what your challenge is called.
Ripple from the heartland. So number 3. So, okay. So tell me a story. I know you're a storyteller. So tell me a story about an act of, I call it act of goodness, an act of goodness that you did in those 2.5 years that you're still seeing the ripple of.
Oh gosh. Okay. So, when I set out to do this project, so since I told you it was really in honor of my father, I was just doing these simple acts of kindness. At the time, my kids were 6 and 9. They're now young adults, but they were little kids then in school. And I was a full-time stay-at-home mom when I took on this project. And so we would collect trash on the way to the park, pick up poop if somebody forgot to pick that up. Smile at someone, let someone go in front of us in the car, like simple things like that. But when my young rabbi came to me about a year into this project, and he said, Linda, I think this is sort of changing you. Why don't you write a book? That was kind of a huge aha moment for me. I had never planned to be an author. But I went forward with that and pitched it at a writers conference. And that's when I met Seal Press and got a contract and ended up writing the book for them. Now, when the book came out, I got interviewed on public broadcasting on our local radio station. And that was a huge, exciting thing for me. I was a stay-at-home mom and I had written this book. So I get a call like 2 months later after my interview on the radio station. And it's a teacher from a town about an hour away from me. And she's like, Linda, it so inspired me that you did this project in memory of your dad, and it really changed you. And it inspired me. I want to do something with my 4th and 5th graders. Will you consider coming to our school and to speak to my kids? And so it was at the end of the year, and I was on the PTO, and there was lots of things happening in my kids' classroom at the end of the year. And I looked at my calendar and I was like, sure, I'll come. So I remember that morning though, waking up and knowing I was going to have to drive an hour each way down to their school and thinking, God, I hope it's worth it, And I get to the classroom, and these little 4th and 5th graders, they're like on the edge of their seats, and they're like, oh, Mrs. Cohen, who was your inspiration to be a writer? Oh, Mrs. Cohen, was your mom a writer? Oh, Mrs. Cohen, someday when I grow up, I want to be a writer too. And I got in the car at the end of the day with my little box of strawberries they had given me and my little bouquet of flowers they had hand tied. And, the tears were like streaming down my face. And I'm thinking, was it worth it? Yes. Oh my gosh, it was so worth it. And at that point, I just knew that I kind of will say I felt like I was divinely called to be doing this work around kindness. And, that was in 2013. So it's been a long time. Yeah. So that's kind of my ripple effect story. And there have been lots of schools and churches and houses of worship and businesses that have started taking on kindness projects that were inspired by something they saw that I had done. And I had never intended that would be a possibility. So.
I love when you said it's my calling. I feel like this work, around whole person health, which is part of the heart, and it's hard to be a receiver or a giver. if you've not healed your heart. And it sounds like you probably got that with your gift from your father, the healing. The other thing, I'm in Kansas City, and there's a big church here called Church of the Resurrection, and they were doing a Love Your Neighbor campaign. And we did not talk. They launched on October 3rd on their 30th year anniversary. And then we launched on October 14th to wrap up around World Kindness Day. And so fascinating. Our friend Mindy Corcoran, who's with Give 7 Days, she's launching something right after we're done. So there's just kind of this, it's like a ball that's rolling.
Well, I was starting to call it a kindness pandemic. I mean, when we hit in March, when we started into this pandemic, I could not tell you how many stories about kindness I was seeing. Just businesses and personal, and people walking through their neighborhoods, and neighbors doing more and more things. And I think you were the one who told me about the Time magazine that was doing a special. I have mine. I ordered mine right after you asked me to be on this, and you told me about it. But People magazine has done it. We had 2 amazing books come out last year. The Ripple, I think it's called The Rabbit Effect, and The War for Kindness. I mean, that's like, people who are more in the medical profession and in the research profession, putting value on this idea of kindness. So while for me, it had been something that I came to personally and didn't have that research background, I'm really thrilled that it's kind of becoming a buzzword right now. So I think it's important. I
wonder what the dictionary says about kindness. Hey, Desiree, I know you're listening. Would you put in what the dictionary says, what the word kindness means? And so for those of you that tuned in this morning on my Facebook Live, I'm going live every day, Linda, and just talking about the act of goodness. By the way, I gave you the quote, and the act of goodness today is give or send a book to a friend.
Oh, that was my first mitzvah. That was my very first mitzvah. So
there's so much overlap. And so I'm going to grab this magazine down here. I've got all kinds of stuff around here to share with people today. I'm so excited. So I was reading, not the National Enquirer, but People magazine with Matthew McConaughey this morning. And so if you're hearing this for the second time, good for you. It's important. I've read it 5 times today and I can't get enough of it. So Matthew has a new book coming out called Green Lights. Have you heard this story yet?
No.
Do you love Matthew McConaughey?
Yeah, I was about to tell you. You could tell me anything about Matthew McConaughey more than one time.
Besides, he has amazing abs. He's just a genuine person when you see him. And he's an amazing actor. But this is an excerpt from his book, Green Lights. And by the way, we're giving away a Green Lights book today. So if you write kind of your act of kindness that you have maybe share, just tell us a story in the comments, and I'll put you in our raffle for it, and Desiree will take care of you. By the way, Desiree is making the magic happen on the back end. I get to show up and do this. So here's what he says. His father had died, and it was a loss that transformed him. Oh. And he said, a realization came to me. I carved these words into a tree. Less impressed, more involved. Interesting thing about less impressed. What do you mean by that? The sooner we become less impressed with our life, our accomplishments, our career, our relationships, the prospects in front of us, the sooner we become less impressed and the more involved with these things, the sooner we get better at them. We must be more than just happy to be here.
Well, don't you feel like when you started paying attention to wanting to do this project, this 31 Days of Kindness, that probably things fell into your lap? You were really focused on this. And that's kind of how I felt with my project. I knew I was looking for 1,000 acts of kindness, and every single day, just something would happen. I honestly tell you, I didn't want to end the project. There was a bit of grieving a second time. My dad had died, and 2.5 years later, I got to the end of the project, and I didn't want it to end because it had really changed my life. So I'm sure with you, there may be some of that too, especially if you've created this huge momentum in this 31 days. So,
I'm glad you brought that up for our listeners, because people are struggling. I've got the opportunity the last few days to be on a conference with Brene Brown and Simon Sinek, and people are, we are grieving.
Yes.
We're grieving the old way. We're also all stuck in, and I love how Simon said, life's been uncertain all along. We're not getting anything.
Yes.
And yet, how do we continue to navigate and stop blaming the pandemic, or stop blaming Black Lives Matter, or stop blaming the political system for our unhappiness? Mm-hmm. And how do we really take that power back and make choices that will help us? So I wanted
that's what I say, choose kindness. You have a choice. And I'm sure you learned this having your accident, and I learned this with the loss of both of my parents, that we don't control what happens anywhere out there. The only thing we have control of every single day is what we choose to do. And whether that's act with kindness, whether that's put stuff up on social media that's, disgruntled or whatever it is. I mean, every day we have that choice. So
yeah, choice is such a big word. Desiree put the kindness up here. Let me just put it on the screen. How do I do that? There we go. Kindness. Have you looked up the kindness?
Oh, yeah, I have, but I couldn't have told you.
I never looked that up.
Yeah.
This is why I love it so much. One of my top values is generosity.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
So
I'd add a little empathy in there. I'd add a little bit of love. I think that you have to have a quality of loving or caring or seeing another human being. And, I mean, I'm not going to go political on you, but I do want to say that when Justice Ginsburg died, and I knew already that Justice Ginsburg and Justice Scalia had a really beautiful friendship. There was a piece of me when I saw the editorial, I don't know if you saw this in the New York Times, I think written by Scalia's son, about how the families were also friends. And so, like you can talk about, we can have differing opinions, and this has always worked in the past, and we can have differing opinions, but we can still have a way to have a kind conversation about it. And I think that I've started thinking, have we gone away from that? Is the civilized society gone? Because we're not willing to have any kind of disagreements with people in any kind way. So, I mean, I am, but I know a lot of people are not.
So I'm curious. Do you think it's easy to do kind things when you're not kind to yourself?
Oh, no. No, I think it has to start with you. I think if you feel bad, hurt people. And I think if you aren't having that bucket filled, like you talked about, taking care of yourself, I mean, it's put the oxygen on yourself and make sure you are feeling full today. And, and if you're not, then work on that. I mean, do the self, do loving kindness for yourself. I've actually started adding that to my presentations. And I started that a few years ago. I added a 3-minute loving kindness meditation at the end. And people often say that's they're one of their favorite parts of my talk, because I'm giving them a few minutes of that love for themselves,
Yeah. when we started this campaign, day one was do something for yourself.
Good.
Self-love. And when people come from that overflow, it's easy to give when you're full.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed right now. So if we're all feeling depleted and overwhelmed, how do we start with making sure we are giving some love to ourselves and care,
Yeah. Well, and you know this because you've done a lot more research in your book about it, but how the 3 chemicals change, right? The oxytocin, the 3 feel-good hormones, oxytocin, dopamine, and
serotonin, dopamine,
oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine. Thank you. I just came from a massage a little bit ago. So
perfect. That's good self-care there, Michelle. That is awesome.
It's self-care. It's self-care Wednesday for me. So let's go back to, and I actually printed out for you, by the way, I printed out your 10 ways to cultivate kindness in a pandemic, but I don't want to talk about those yet. I want to talk about another story. Give me a surprise where maybe you did a kind act for somebody and the results you got back, the way they responded.
I'm going to tell you a story and how my son helped me respond to something. So I told you I was a full-time stay-at-home mom when I started writing the book, and I'm doing this. It was when I was doing the Mitzvah project. I was actually, I had a home-based business. I was selling a skincare line, home-based business. And my kids were pretty little, and I belonged to a networking group of professional women. And I would always, I think my son was probably 5. And, so I felt like I had to change to get dressed and go to these meetings. And I sort of felt sometimes like a bit of an imposter, but I'd go to these meetings, and many of these women were, their kids were older and grown, and they were kind of mentors for me in that stage. I was, in my young 30s, mid 30s, but they all were going to this great Voices lecture series. It was a women's lecture series that was held in a local church with amazing authors who would come every 4 times a year. But it was a little spendy for me. It was about $200 for the series. And for me, that was a huge, reach. But I decided this one year I was going to do it. And I was super excited. I was going to get to go with several of the women to this, series a few times a year. And it got to be April, and I realized that I couldn't use the April ticket because it was the Jewish holiday of Passover. And so I was going to be celebrating Passover. So a couple months before at my networking group, I stood up and I was like, hey, does anybody want to buy this ticket from me because I can't go to the to the Voices lecture series. And I was hoping to get the $50 back because it was kind of a lot of money for me. And so, I had one woman come up to me privately and she said, would you consider doing a mitzvah and giving me that ticket? I have a friend who's just come through chemotherapy and I know it would be a huge thing for her to get to go to this. And my first thought was not yes. My first thought was like, oh, I really wanted the $50 back. When I got home that night and I told my son that story, he said, I hope you did the right thing, Mom. And thankfully, my second thought was, gosh, these women who were there for me when my dad died, who, wrote me cards and came to visit me and knew what it was like to lose a parent, because many of them had already lost parents. I absolutely will give this ticket to the stranger. I didn't know her, and make sure she gets to go to that Voices lecture series. So I guess, again, choose. You don't always have that first gut reaction, which is like, oh, yeah, sure. And that's, for me, I'm glad I made the right choice. And it was kind of a wonderful conversation to have with my, probably 8-year-old son at the time. So.
Well, let's go to the kids, because we have a lot of schools doing the kindness campaign with us. So talk about how your kids have shifted based on this experience, because I believe kids kind of model what they see.
Oh gosh, that's such a good question, because I have hindsight now. When we were in it with me, we'd be at Costco and some woman would ask my daughter, like, should I try on the gloves, for a stranger? And then we would have a whole discussion. I remember one time there was like a missing dog and my son and I were trying to get the dog and we weren't successful. We were like driving through streets in a suburb. And that night at dinner, we talked about it. Like, did that count? Did it not count? And my son and I were like, yeah, we tried. And in Judaism, actually, if you intend to do a kindness, even if you're not successful, or a mitzvah, it does actually count. And my husband and my daughter were like, no way, that doesn't count. So we had all sorts of great conversations around the dinner table in those years. Now, when my book came out, and my son was probably 12 at the time, at my book launch at Powell's, I remember him raising his hand and he was like, well, Mom, why don't you tell the story about how you yelled at that lady in the car after Blockbuster Video and she was rushing in front of you? He remembered everything, both good and bad. And, he's kind of a jokester anyway. So I was worried. I was like, okay, I guess they didn't follow my example, but they're now young adults and, they're good people. And I do think they have seen some of that modeling. And I see some of the kindnesses that they, have chosen to do. They're different than me. Neither of them are extroverts. They're more introverted kids, but they are definitely on that spectrum of knowing what's kind, knowing what's right, and trying to make those choices when they can with roommates or, or coworkers or even strangers. So I guess that's the answer, They do see what we do.
So if you were giving guidance to the parents that are listening today, trying to navigate this time and educate their children about kindness, what words of wisdom would you share with them?
I mean, I would say you can talk about it. You can talk about things and they will bring you really interesting conversations. I mean, I think for me, that was one of the pieces, like, is this a kindness? Does this count? And then we would get to have really great conversations about that. So I have a whole chapter in my book, which was like the lessons I learned from my kids as well. So, let them be the guides. I think a lot of times as adults, we do get sort of jaded, and I don't know that our kids are. And I don't know what was happening in Kansas City, but out here, when the pandemic hit, there was sidewalk chalk everywhere. There were little rocks in my neighborhood. There were little signs got held, in trees. And I think that there was this real feeling from the kids in my neighborhood that we are in this together and we'll get through this. And now, we're 7 months into it. There could be fatigue. We're tired. Some parents it's very overwhelming, this experience we're all collectively living through. But I do think you can let your kids be your guides and hopefully have conversations, and they may surprise you. So,
I'm thinking about that saying, we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
I think we're all in the same storm. We're not all in the same boat.
Do you know the Thich Nhat Hanh story about being in a storm? Have you heard this?
No, let's do it.
So Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh has this idea, and I think it's a story I believe it's true, but when the Vietnamese refugees were leaving Vietnam and they were in these very choppy waters, in a boat, if they hit a terrible storm or a pirate ship, if one person in that boat could remain calm, if one person could be the calm in the storm, then usually the boats were fine and could make it to safety. But if everybody panics in the boat, then the ships usually will sink or would sink. So, his suggestion is try to just be the calm in the storm. And again, I think that goes back to Michelle, you taking care of what do you need, and I know you're going to talk about it, but one of my very first things in that, 10 ways to cultivate kindness while social distancing is attend to your heart. So it's really getting clear every single day right now, what do I need? And, that's different for all of us. And it's different every hour and potentially every day. So
it's interesting. I did a talk for a company this morning, and one of the questions that I've added to my talk, because I create a talk now called Small Changes, Big Shifts, Building Rhythm and Resilience, which is now the tagline of my show. It used to be just put the odds in your favor. Okay. And we changed that. I changed a question in the psycho-spiritual quadrant to asking for help.
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to ask for help. And I would also shift that in. And here's a great act of kindness is to ask your kids or your significant other or your coworker, what can I do to support you today?
Yeah.
What's one thing I could do to support you today that would be helpful? So I think that's a great idea as we talk about that. Before I shift to, I really do want to get these. I'm so glad I found the 10 ways to cultivate kindness. I kind of scoured through your website a little bit.
Can I just add one last thing before we move on to that other section, though, is I'm sure you're talking about this, but I put a gratitude board up outside of my office at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was looking at it the other day, and it's pretty full because it's a huge Post-it note board, but you could say that with your kids too. What kindness have you done today? Now, I think my son added one thing. He is 20, and my daughter added a few things, but mostly they were my things,
Mm-hmm.
So put up what have you done kind today kind of a list.
I love that. And so, hey, in the show notes for today, I would encourage you to go ahead and put that in there. What have you done kind, and how are the kindness acts doing? And I'm guessing a lot of you have said to me, Michelle, I always do kind acts. And I get that. What's something about the momentum of all of this kind of being thoughtful on it and just kind of shaking it up a little bit, because I know I'm around a lot of kind people. I get that. So just a way to do something fun, collaborative, remind us, and also just celebrate. You know what? I'm doing it, and I do it.
I would say the same thing to you. Like, I go back and look at my blog. I kept that blog for 2 years. I don't have 1,000 mitzvahs in my book. We put about 90 mitzvahs in there, but I go back and look at that blog. I'm like, God, I totally forgot about that. It's kind of fun. No, we don't remember every single thing that we've done in our lives. So, putting a Post-it note up, a big Post-it note up, could be a fun way for you to remember things.
Especially as we navigate this time, this next 6 days going into just like you said about helping the dog. I remember I was driving home from the office in the spring, a few months ago, and somebody's dog, actually it was before the pandemic, probably March, right before the pandemic, and somebody's 2 little white dogs, and I have 2 little white dogs, and they were running crazy in this busy intersection. And I was like, whoa. So I stopped my car, and the gal's coming, I can't find my dogs. I know what anxiety is like. I said, you know what? They're right there. She's like, oh my gosh. But I just kind of stopped in the middle of the road. And, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it reminds me just what's your innate, and how can you make that more innate? That is the first thing you think of, instead of blah, 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 blah. Who are you? Who do you think you are? And you whatever. And say, you know what? Gosh, I wonder what they're going through today. Right. I wonder how I could show up as a different person for them.
Well, even you just say this. And for me, I think as the person that I am now, I think this has been hard for me because we've been so locked up in our houses and social distancing. I'm in Oregon. We had wildfires. We were inside for 13 days with horrible air quality. So, yesterday I went for a walk in my neighborhood early in the morning, and I bumped into a new neighbor who just moved here in August, and she's got one little kid in her pouch and one she's walking in the hand and a dog. And, I knew it was just fun to connect with her. And I knew what it would be like to be a young mom in this neighborhood. And it was nice. We stood and talked for 10 minutes, a brand new stranger. And I think those social connections of seeing another person, like you said, you could see what it was like when somebody has their dogs and they're panicking. And I could see in this mom's eyes how hard it would be to be a new person in a new neighborhood and really not know anybody and be completely locked up. So it was I felt like at the end, I felt excited and sort of, happy that we had a chance to bump into each other, and hope she did too. So
At your natural endorphins.
it is.
It makes me think of my friend, Sonia Choquette. She says, look at people soul to soul versus roll to roll.
Ooh, I like that.
Soul to soul versus roll to roll. And so if we can all do that through these interesting times, we'll come out better on the other side without a doubt. I want to give a shout out, speaking of kindness, I want to give a shout out to Advent Health, our show sponsor today. Advent Health is across the street across the highway from my office. And they're such good go-to people. The doctors over there help me take care of people. So I want to give a shout out to them for all the great things they're doing in promoting whole person health. So thank you, Advent Health, for that. Let's, before we turn to your top 10, as we start to wrap up, what does kindness catalyst mean to you?
Oh, that's a great question. Somebody kind of gave me that name, a speaker colleague. I love it because I feel like we are all lots of people are doing kindness, but I feel like one of my loves when I show up in an audience or in a room or whatever is just to maybe be that utsy person. That's like a Yiddish word for just giving a nudge or giving an idea or, sharing something. I told you to put something up on the wall. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. So I feel like I could be that catalyst for something that, then goes out and is the acts that you do or you ripple out. So I think that's why I like that word. So.
Oh, I love it. Catalyst. So I have a couple questions I'm going to ask you at the end, but I want to highlight this 10 ways to cultivate kindness. And people can get this at your website, Linda Cohen, consulting.com, Linda Cohen, consulting.com. You can find her right here. Just take off the 1,000 Mitzvahs book, but you can find her right there. And she has this 10 ways to cultivate kindness during social distancing. So I'm curious, of the 10, do you have a favorite?
Well, I didn't grab my list right before we got on. So
Let me read them for you.
Sure. Read them out loud.
Okay. So I'll read them for you. And actually, I'm going to read them and you're going to tell me a 30-second story.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go. Attend to your heart. Okay. And I'm going to help you out. There you go.
Take a deep breath.
All right. I love how you say, put your hands on your heart.
Love that. Yeah.
All right. Put your hands on your heart. Okay.
You can't be overwhelmed when you do this. I really don't think you can. So.
Well, and the other thing too, that people don't get, we're energy.
Yeah.
And when you put your hands energetically, we all have our own healing wands.
Yeah.
And so I try to teach my patients, it's not my hands. It's you have those too. We all have. And how do you help yourself? As you put your hands ideally skin to skin. Okay. I'm going to jump around just to throw you off.
You just made me sad because I also feel like this is a mother's love, and my mom is not here anymore. So yeah.
So
I am a mother. So yeah.
Take a breath. It's okay to acknowledge that your heart's touched. And I would say, if you're not sad when you have those relationships, then the love wasn't that deep. So, obviously had a good, loving relationship. What about, here's perfect. Voice your love. What do you think about when I say that?
I just think if you think of someone, if you have a thought or again, that little nudge, call them, send them an email, send them a text, make them a video. Right now, I just think all of us are desperate for that connection. And I am so lucky to be both the giver and the receiver of a lot of that right now. So send your love, give your love. What was my line? Something about love.
Voice your love.
Voice your love.
I love the way you wrote that. So it's interesting. This morning, I was thinking about a friend of mine, and I've been thinking about her a couple. People kind of fly through my awareness, and if they stay there, I know I'm meant to reach out. That's kind of my clue, my nudge. Yeah. And so I reached out to her, and she said, "Oh my gosh, that just made my day." And then I had another person that I thought about reaching out to, and I didn't. And then she reached out to me.
Yeah, well, that's the universe too, because we are all connected. You said that, Michelle. So.
We are all connected. Let's go one more. Okay. Display your thanks.
Oh, well, at the beginning of the pandemic, a neighbor and I, we did chalk art between our two houses, which are about a block apart. We did hearts all down the sidewalk. And we put up a sign for our delivery folks. And I have another friend. I didn't do this during the pandemic. I've done it in the past, put out water, put out kind bars, put out snacks for the delivery people. I know people were doing 7 o'clock hour with healthcare workers. I mean, I did a very silly video about 40 days into the pandemic, with my little stethoscopes that were plastic and a little noisemaker. And it was so silly. And I asked my colleagues, I'm like, should I put this up? And they're like, yes. And it was like, thank you, healthcare workers, So any way we can say thank you, I don't think you can say thank you enough. So as long as you mean it and it's really, honest and truthful. So,
well, there's a quote by Eckhart, not Eckhart,
totally.
Master. Yeah. Who am I thinking of? Where he says if the only prayer you ever said was thank you, that would be enough.
Yeah.
Master Eckhart. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. Only if you just would say thank you. I really appreciate that. I want to think about some things as I was preparing for our time together today. What I want to share with our listeners, we are less than 2 weeks out from the election. People are panicked, no matter what side, and we're not going to make this political, what side you're on. I'm going to encourage you, and this is what I tell myself, don't let your imagination get hijacked. That was from one of my guests during the Small Changes, Big Shifts Rhythm and Resilience series I did in April. Little Sonia Tolley, I've known Sonia, she was probably, she's 30, 10. Wow. And she said that, don't let your imagination get hijacked. So I want to remind you, don't let your imagination get hijacked.
Can I add one thing to that too, which is maybe don't gulp media right now. Perhaps you take sips of media because I think media can make us overwhelmed too. And I might encourage you to listen to some other music or something else instead of as much media right now. Just be my suggestion. So.
Yeah, you got to take it in just tiny snackables. Meister Eckhart. Thanks, Liz. Liz, you're a rock star. Thanks for being on and always covering my back here. I'm grateful. So as we wrap up, if you had a magic wand, what would you do?
Me? If I had a magic wand? Mm-hmm. I do have a magic wand in here somewhere. I love what you said about soul to soul. I would make sure that people see each other as deep, rich, similar human beings. And I would spread this beautiful blanket of love and kindness everywhere. And maybe we would all have our eyes open suddenly with this wand going over us to say, wow, I didn't realize we had been holding on to so many of these negative feelings, and let's move forward with more positivity. So,
life is so magical. I mean, it's magical that I'm here in Kansas City. You're in Oregon. Yeah. We connected via on a whim. I did some research, saw the word kindness catalyst, and I thought I want her to be on my show. And I reached out to you on LinkedIn, and you said yes. And here we are. And then we have some other connections. Our friend Kim Beck, I'm going to say hi to her.
Yes.
Who's doing some great work over in Columbia, Missouri. And also,
she actually sent me a link. Didn't know you and I had connected and said, hey, do you know my friend is doing this next month? And I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. So
yeah, that's that ripple. People, it's so magical. And I want you all to just get on the magic carpet ride with us. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not clouds in the sky. I'm grounded in reality. Most of the time, I'm a fairly grounded. I'm an earth person, even though I'm a fire sign. But let's take a minute and say, oh my gosh, my fingers work today. I remember 5 years ago, Linda, with that accident. Yeah. And this is going to play into part of your assignment, everybody, is I remember 5 years ago when I was flat on my back and I couldn't move my legs. And I was in such pain because I had to have friends help lift me up just so I can go to the restroom. And I had to have one of those potties by my bed. I couldn't even get to the bathroom. But what I remember is how much I take for granted the gift of moving my legs and my feet and the ability to be able to walk and the ability to be able to use the restroom and the ability to, my thumb was also broken. And my elbow was broken and some minor things to just be able to write. When I palpate, and as a chiropractor, I use your thumb to palpate a lot of times, and palpate is, touching the vertebrae. And it took me about 3 years before I could actually use my thumb to do that. Wow. And now when I do it, I actually say, thank you. And not every single day, but every week I'm reminded that I could do that now. So I want you all to think about what's working in your life. And so anyhow, I'm sorry, I'm on a tangent. So this talks about what's your medicine. So what I also learned in that time period, which is part of this campaign, is at the bottom of the card or at the end of the day, people have a sheet, Linda, that they can do. Are you actually doing the campaign?
I signed up for it yesterday, and I did see the 1 through 31, and you're writing whether it was positive or
or just positive. Kind of your jam. We all have our jam. Okay. Sure. And so, and you kind of, your reaction number, is it like, oh my gosh, that just filled me up, or, that was okay. And I at the end of this campaign, you're going to know what your medicine is. Mm-hmm. And so what's your medicine, Linda? What is it that God put in your heart to share with the world?
I think it is connecting with people. It's really smiling, and I love meeting a new person, whether it's on an airplane or walking down the street or at the farmer's market. I love hearing people's stories. I get excited by that. And I think I'm also a connector. So if I meet a couple people that I think should know each other, I really want them to meet, and I'll go out of my way to make sure that happens. So, those are two things I know I was put here to do. And I also, you have your hug shirt. So my dad was a hugger. I definitely have something in my book about this, but I learned from him how to be a hugger. And for years, I think I wrote something once about is the hug, the new handshake, because there is that oxytocin you get when you give somebody a nice hug. So, and I think some of us are missing that right now.
Especially when you do it heart to heart.
Yes, exactly.
Heart attack. Hey, by the way, I'm going to be finding one of these shirts and giving it away during the next 31 days or 21 days, just so you know, just a heads up. And I've got it. Once again, I got a shirt down there. I'm going to give it away this week, but we're giving away Matthew McConaughey's new book, Green Lights. Haven't read it, but when how you just read an article and you're like, you know what? I need something positive. And I love true stories. And so super excited about that.
Have you seen Lady Gaga's new book? Because she has a new book about kindness as well. And it's from teens. So if you have any audience members who have teenage kids, this is a really beautiful, heartfelt book. I think it's called Love, Kind, and there's a third word. I can send it to you, Michelle. But
well, we're going to find that book. Okay. We will find that book. So as we start to wrap up the show, I want to say thank you so much for listening to Small Changes, Big Shifts. Thank you for joining that campaign. It's not too late. You can sign up today. You just will be starting with day 1, so you won't be actually on the same day we're on. But there's never a bad day to be kind or a bad moment. Never a bad moment to do that. So I'm going to encourage all of our followers to share the message, and let's continue to create this ripple. So I'd like to end the show with a favorite quote. Do you have a favorite quote?
Oh, from Leo Buscaglia. Never underestimate the power of a kindness. A smile or a simple act of kindness can make somebody's day. I know that. Leo Buscaglia, you have it? Read it out, because I know
this is day 5, by the way.
Oh, good.
Okay, and we'll just wrap this up as my quote. Once again, thank you again for joining me, Linda Cohen.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the talk today.
So much fun. I mean, we're going to be I'm a people collector. So you're in my tribe now forever.
In Kansas City I'll be coming to your town soon. So sometime we'll get together. And once again, a big shout out to Advent Health. Thank you for you sponsoring this show and helping to spread the message. So here's the quote that Linda was sharing, and it was the day 5 of the kindness campaign, because if you listen to my podcast, my little live video that day, I talk about why this is so important. And there's a whole story I can tell you more later, Linda. Too often we underestimate the power of touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring. All of which have the potential to turn the life around. Your acts are turning people's lives around. You will never know the ripple it's creating, nor do you need to know. Just keep being you. I'm sending you all big heart-to-heart hugs. Hey, and we'll chat with you soon. Yay! I sure appreciate you listening to Small Changes, Big Shifts. If you go to the website, smallchangesbigshifts.com, we'll have the show notes ready for you there. If this episode inspired you to make a small change that will lead to a big shift, please share with a friend. You can catch our episode on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and our website. And if you feel like it, please leave a rating or a comment. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch our episode next week. Blessings to you.